Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason and I'm here to bring you your fight picks for UFC 242, where the Eagle Khabib Nurmagomedov will be taking on the Diamond Dustin Poirier and will be a clash of the Titans at 155 pounds. This is going to be one spectacular event taking place in Abu Dhabi. Let's talk about it. Here's the show. All right, the 155-pound strap, the crown, the former division held hostage by Conor McGregor and his boxing career is on the line in Abu Dhabi. So I got to cut right to the chase here, and I got to tell you who I think is going to win. I think the diamond is going to shine bright. It's going to be dusted in the sky with diamonds in Abu Dhabi. And I have him winning on all metrics here so far. No guarantee he's going to get it done here, and this is a shock-the-world situation. He is a heavy underdog at this time, so from the betting perspective, this is a nice payout, and I think worth taking a chance on. But let's talk about why. There's a couple of factors. Some of them are very cut and dry, I think, in the skill sets, and some of them are X factors that I think we can't necessarily really account for statistically whatsoever, intangibles, if you will. So let's talk about Khabib. We know his style. It's mauling. We've seen what he did to Michael Johnson, Edson Barboza, what he did to Conor. This guy, once he takes you down, does pulverize you. There's no doubt about it. You know, he is a wrecking machine, a smashing machine, and that's what he's basically done to everyone. No one has ever really given him a problem, but I think that Dustin Poirier could. So I got a kind of an idea of the style of how I think he can do it. So I believe that if Poirier can keep heavy pressure, he will be able to prevent Khabib from making wild power. Well, wild might be a little bit over a statement, but a dramatic heavy shot to score a basically conclusive, definitive takedown. If Poirier is able to hold Khabib on the fence, he will not be able to be explosive or as explosive, and I think that Poirier will be able to shut down his takedown game. Also, we know that Khabib uses a very high parrying guard. You know, he makes like he's answering the phone when he's boxing. He ducks his chin back, he pulls it up in the air, and he backs and he parries away. I think if Poirier can exploit that backwards movement and keep Khabib on the back foot to the cage, it's going to nullify, one, his wrestling ability, and it's going to open up great body hooks. So we know that Poirier is probably, outside of maybe Conor, but the Conor that Khabib got maybe wasn't the same guy anymore. But we know Poirier is a great power puncher, and while Barboza is a great puncher, I don't think he's quite the technical powerhouse that Poirier is. So maybe with the kicks, let's not put Barboza away for his kicks, but those take range that I think that Khabib was always going to stop. I think Poirier is going to want to fight this deep into the pocket and utilize a lot of 1, 2, 3 combinations going to the head and get him thinking about that high parry guard, keep him thinking about blocking his chin, and he's going to open up amazing body shots. And I think that's the key to hurting Khabib at this point. I think hooking him to the liver and making him injured is the easiest way or best pathway to victory. Also, we know that Dustin Poirier has some ground skills. So obviously an American top team, we know that Mike Brown and company is going to have him training with wrestlers. Remember, Yoel Romero is down there. I mean, the guy can see a top caliber, Olympic caliber wrestler basically any day of the week, and guys like that are down there. And I think that Poirier, with his ground base that Conor lacked, trained a lot of grappling, but I think he didn't have the base to, sharpen his tools effectively. I think that Poirier, with his 7 submissions over his 25 wins, has proven that he has a competent grappling game that I think he's going to be able to lean on with his training, and he could potentially, nullify Khabib's game. I don't think it's going to be quite the smashing machine like what he did to Conor in his second round. I don't think Khabib is just going to be laying it on. I think that Dustin is going to be better at stopping or preventing Khabib. I think that he has the skill set and the base to exploit that. Let's talk about a Khabib though, and he's stoic, he's a robot, he's also a fun kind of guy to listen to, in interviews. But I always get this, very A lot of family values there and things like that. He holds his father and all those people in very high regard, and I have nothing bad to say about them. But he has fought outside of his, let's call it, home area for quite a while. He's fought in Vegas, he's fought in other parts of the world, but he's never actually fought at home. His dad's never been ringside for any of his matches, at least I believe in the UFC. Correct me on that if anybody knows otherwise. He's never fought while he's been close to his family. Normally he goes right from AKA to wherever he's fighting, and then he might go home back to Dagestan afterwards. In this contest, he, I believe, is going to be spending time with his family, time with his dad. I think his dad's going to be there, right? He might even be in his corner, Abdul Nap. And I think that's a lot for a guy that's never actually fought in front of any of his friends and family before. You know, I can just imagine myself, and I'm not an athlete or by any stretch of the imagination, especially at this level. But if I was performing or doing something in front of my dad or somebody, you know, else that I know and love, and I got into trouble, or, you know, had a lot of pressure on me to perform well that night, it's the first time I've ever been there, I'm going to get nervous. I think I might make some mistakes, especially if things don't go my way. So I think if Poirier can hurt Khabib, can stuff those takedowns, can get him to go back into the corner, and his dad's talking to him. Maybe he's not saying it, but there's like a little bit of, hey, what's going on here? You know, like a little bit of disappointment, a little bit of frustration on the part of his father and him that he's not performing in front of, you know, basically the closest he's ever going to get to performing in front of a home audience. I think maybe Khabib goes back there, you know, off the stool. He starts reaching a little. He's lunging. He's overextending. And I think Poirier is then going to be able to take advantage of that. And that's even to say if it makes it to the stool. If he starts to feel like he has to put this thing away, he tries to smell blood too early, I think that he could potentially make a mistake due to the pressure of the situation. And these are all X factors, you know. We have no idea how Khabib is going to perform. He could perform just like he did in the Conor matchup, and, you know, this isn't going to be a problem at all. It's basically just going to be, you know, kind of a standard affair. But it's really hard to say right now. We've never seen Khabib, like I said, perform under these conditions, and it's going to be interesting. Also, you know, I think we look at Dustin's game. He's the kind of guy I think that could potentially get this done. But none of these guys have really fought these wrestling-heavy fighters. Some of these guys have had wrestling in their back pocket, no doubt about it. Guys like Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, while he is a wrestler, doesn't really utilize it. But these are guys that could have potentially, you know, scored some takedowns had they really went for him. And I think that Poirier kind of has an understanding of how to fight a guy like Khabib. I don't think Khabib is as special as people make him out to be, but now that he's champion, now that he's healthy, I think we'll finally be able to see, what Khabib's really made of by fighting the best. You know, his pathway to get here, you know, granted, he did fight Conor, but the Conor of a few years ago is not the Conor that we have today. In my personal opinion, he might make a rebound, but I don't think Khabib fought the best version of Conor. And then obviously, Al Iaquinta is a very competent fighter, but you know, that whole thing in New York and the Dolly and Ferguson, I mean, that all just kind of played out not in a way that I thought was earning of Khabib to have that title, in all honesty. Also, this is very much hypothetical because I think Poirier would have to obviously win this one, but I think this actually sets the lightweight division up in a really interesting way. So if Poirier wins, obviously that's automatically Tony Ferguson's fight. And I think that happens. I think Tony fights the winner no matter what. I mean, something barring, you know, anything happening to Tony, he's getting the phone call. He might even be there in Abu Dhabi right away. I have no doubt about that. Dana should probably just buy the guy a ticket and just put him there ringside. Let's just start the hype up, whoever takes it. And then I think it also opens things up because then you have, I think, Conor getting a rematch with Khabib if Khabib loses. Right now, with Khabib winning and holding on to the title, Conor really never gets another shot at it until, he either A, fights and gets some victories, or, you know, Khabib can make time for him. He's talking about fighting GSP. He obviously wants to fight Tony, and those are hard fights. But I think we are, as fans, going to get to see potentially that rematch of Conor Khabib if he loses, because I think the UFC will really have no stake. You know, there's no hostage, there's no title to hold hostage. If Conor wins at that point, he just gets to make his return, and you can sell that as a main event or co-main event to Tony versus Poirier. And I love that card. That card, you don't even need any other fights. You could just sell both of those fights to us for $60, and we'd all pay out. I rest assured on that one. but it'll guarantee to be part of a big card and would be interesting. So that's my little hypothetical behind it as well. That's kind of why I'd like to see this outcome. But if Khabib wins, I get it. I definitely would understand. I'm not sure this actually is going to come to pass, but it crunches out well. We've been on some some good winning streaks right now, so I actually have a lot of confidence in this one. And then the way Poirier is an underdog at the moment, I really like it as well, just from a pure betting perspective, and it's just, your typical grappler versus striker kind of combo. It's that kind of matchup. We have a guy who's mauling, gloves takedowns versus a guy that's a heavy boxer and power puncher. And we'll see what happens there. It is the fight game. Anything can happen. Khabib could score a takedown right away and just maul him to a TKO. Poirier can hook him with that body shot I was talking about, hit Khabib in the liver. And I don't care how tough you are. When guys get hit in the liver, they go down. And I think that's the key to victory here for Poirier, is playing that high guard, making him feel comfortable, and exploiting it. Maybe with a body kick, although that's always tough when you put your leg out there for Khabib, or a hook to the body off of some feints and playing that high game. It's almost like the way Shevchenko picked up her head kick KO, right? She kept kicking her in the body, bang. She got her to lull and kicked her in the head, and she bit, she took the bait. Same goes with Conor and the way he was knocked down in their outing. Khabib, was taking him down a lot. Conor knew he was going to get taken down a lot. So when Khabib, and he was lightning fast that night, I don't want to say he wasn't. I've watched it many times, and he really had no tells on this. He made one small motion, like a look down, basically, that he was going to go, shoot in, and Conor just kept his hands down and ate a big right hand over the top. So, guys are susceptible to, being baited into things they may not want to do. And I think that could happen here. I think that Poirier is going to pick up a W in Abu Dhabi. I think he's going to shock the world. I think that he's going to be our 155-pound champion, and it's going to be interesting from here, because what happens with him and Tony, potentially, does Tony end up fighting? Who knows? I'm excited, though. I'd love to see it happen. So like I said, we are picking the Diamond, Dustin Poirier, and new 155-pound champion. All right, so I think that's the longest I've ever spoken about an event at all. Like I said, I had a lot to say. I kind of need to do a little bit of housekeeping for the rest of this card. So for the time that I'm recording this, I was just so excited to talk about the main event. I've been thinking about it for weeks now. But for the rest of this event, I only have the non-debuting fights actually crunched out. For the debuting fights that are out there, and there are quite a few. I think there's, 5? Yeah, there's 5 fights, including debut fighters in the UFC. So I think for those, I am missing a detail of information that I don't have at the moment for all of them, and I should have it by the time of weigh-in. So what I'm probably going to do is post those to social media. So if you're on the lookout for those fights, they'll go there. Maybe I'll even put them on the Patreon. I'm not really too sure. That they'll definitely go up before the fight. I will announce them in some way. We should have that information by weigh-in time. But really, we're just going to have the rest of the fights that don't have a debuting fighter in them. And there are some okay ones in here. We're about to get into Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder, which is by far, well, you know what, third fight. You know what, let's just continue here with the Barboza and Felder matchup here. So with the Irish Dragon taking on Edson Barboza, and this is really interesting contest. So we have two phenomenal strikers in Barboza and the Irish Dragon, and I think ultimately, though, Barboza actually gets it done here. So I think that he is a little bit better striker, and I think he's a little bit better in terms of his available toolkit. So the Irish Dragon is very good with his hands, but I think Barboza is just a little bit more balanced package. His wheel kick, his switch kicks are so phenomenal that I think that Felder's going to have a hard time dealing with him. When we look at, Felder's career, he's had really not too much of a problem against guys that either I don't think are the best strikers or have bad chins, or guys that really prefer grappling. And Barboza doesn't. He has a chin, and he doesn't prefer grappling at all. In James Vick, he defeats him via decision, but, I don't like Vick's chin. I don't like his guard. He's not very good at parrying punches, and I think that's why he fell victim with a loss against Felder. He fights Charles Oliveira. We know Oliveira likes to get it to the ground, and he ends up getting a TKO via elbows against him. Granted, he did have that great grappling defense, but that's not a factor when you're fighting Barboza. And then we saw him fight Mike Perry and take an L, a guy that is tough, a guy that likes to brawl. He took an L against him. He's taken an L against Francisco Trinaldo. Guys that I think are very good strikers. We look over at Barboza. What is he? He's a phenomenal striker. Yes, he's lost to the best of the best in this division. Lost to Gaethje, Kevin Lee, Khabib Nurmagomedov. However, he beat Dan Hooker. Look at him in his outing against Hooker. It was unreal. Did Hooker have a bad night? Maybe, but I think Hooker and Felder have a lot more in common than meets the eye here. And I think ultimately Barboza is able to maybe put Felder away. I think he probably will, to be perfectly honest. Most of Barboza's fights do happen to end in some kind of stoppage either way. So I really think that Barboza is going to be able to do it here. I think that he has the superior output. I think his 5-inch reach advantage is going to come through very nicely here. And both these guys train at phenomenal gyms. So the gym isn't really a factor here. We have Felder over at Rufus Sport. We have Barboza over at ATT. I think the ATT is slightly better and more well-rounded, but we know the striking from Duke Rufus, the training you can get over there is phenomenal, and Paul Felder really, really demonstrates that very well. Ultimately, though, I think because of the matchup, because of the reach advantage, because of Edson Barboza's style and training and everything, I think we ultimately have to go with Edson Barboza here in Abu Dhabi. All right, and our next one here, this is a fight fans fight. This is I don't have too much like the phrase casual, but this is one not flying under the radar, I think, of the serious fan. And that's Islam Makhachev taking on Davi Ramos, and this one should be a phenomenal grappling contest. So we know that Makhachev is on the younger side, right? He's still relatively green, I'm going to say, for his 27 years of age, even though he has more fights than Ramos. Ramos is a guy that comes from the BJJ world. He's 32 years old. He basically did it all over there. He has absolute titles. He has weight class gold. He is a guy that I think is going to give Makhachev an interesting fight. So I ultimately think that Ramos and his experience in the grappling world outside of MMA is going to come through here. Granted, Makhachev's, I think, striking is maybe a little bit better than Ramos's, but I think Ramos and Makhachev are really going to want to play the grappling game. I think they're going to want to see who is better. Is it the wrestling and sambo style of Makhachev? Is it the Brazilian jiu-jitsu pedigree of Ramos? I think this is a clash of styles here in the grappling world, and I think it's going to be phenomenal. Ultimately, though, I think Ramos gets it done here. I think his experience with guys like Makhachev, training BJJ for years and playing, in the absolutes world, I think that he's going to be able to deal with a kid like Makhachev. I'm not sure that Makhachev has all of the technical ability that I think Ramos is going to be able to trap him with using his BJJ style. I think that he's likely to get some great sweeps and passes here, and it's going to be something that maybe not Islam has never seen, but never seen at this level. Ramos is just an amazing BJJ star, and I think he's going to put that on demonstration here. The only caveat I want to throw out there is that if, let's say, Makhachev does actually want to strike with Ramos, I think that he might have a slight advantage here. Ramos is not the best striker, 1 KO over his 10 wins, and it's only 3 for Makhachev, but I think he does look good. He has a recent one, too, against Gleison Tibau. He didn't want to, get in any kind of grappling with Tibau, and he was able to, get it done that way. So I think that Makhachev, I really like him, but I think he's going to take an L here, and it could be a learning L. Meanwhile, Ramos, I think, is going to go on and, he's going to continue climbing that ladder and picking up a W in Abu Dhabi, which is kind of bad because it's going to be maybe a sad day for the AKA guys and a lot of these stars out in Abu Dhabi. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. I really don't. Between Makhachev, I have here taking an L, and Nurmagomedov, it's not looking too good over in Abu Dhabi. So we'll see how it plays out, though. Ultimately, are picking the Tasmanian Devil, Davi Ramos, in this one. All right, so this next one we have Curtis Razor Blades taking on Shamil Abdurakhimov, and this is kind of an interesting fight. I'm not too crazy about either one of these guys, to be perfectly honest. I think Curtis Blades actually underperforms a little bit, to be perfectly honest. But I think he's good enough to get a W here. His takedown game is phenomenal. Obviously, he wasn't able to execute it against the likes of Francis Ngannou, but that guy just has dynamite in his hands. He's swinging lunchboxes out there at the end of his fist, and I think Abdurakhimov is not quite Francis Francis Ngannou levels of power. So he's got his 9 KOs over 20 victories. He does have a TKO over Marcin Tybura in his last outing back in April, and he's a great fighter, but I think Blades has fought other guys kind of like him. Look, he's beat Overeem, he's beat Hunt. Not that Olynyk's a big power puncher. Beats Justin Willis. I mean, he has great wins over guys that I think are just as good as Aberdikimov, and I think he's going to take him down, grind his gas tank, and expose kind of the older fighter that Aberdikimov is. I think he's going to gas him out and play that heavy cardio, ground and pound game that we know that Blades is so good at. He's not technical on the ground, but I think he's able to, hold a guy like Aberdikimov down. Blades is a little bit bigger, even though he does have a slight, he has a 4-inch reach advantage. He has, I think, everything you need to beat a guy like Aberdikimov, and I see him getting it done here. So he is the one we are predicting, Curtis Razor Blades, to pick up a W in Abu Dhabi. All right, in our next matchup, we have kind of a hard fight for me to call. I don't know much about either one of these guys, but we have Merbek Taisimov taking on Diego Ferreira in what should be an interesting fight. So these guys are fairly similar, I think in a lot of ways. We have Taisimov 27-5. He has a great record, but we haven't really seen him do much in the UFC. He has a last win over Desmond Green. Maybe he's going to climb his way up the ladder and break out a little bit. Soon. And same goes for Ferreira. He's a guy who has a lot of wins. He's 4-fight win streak in a row going up against Taisimov 6-fight win streak. But a lot of these guys has really shined through and been able to kind of go through into the higher echelons of the sport. So maybe this is their chance to break out here. And when I look at him, I think it's, if Diego Ferreira, he's not a big striker. He does like the grappling game. Taisimov prefers, I think, a little bit more heavy hands, and it's going to be a tough one because I can see Taisimov picking up a KO here, but I can also see Ferreira grinding him out and using his superior, what I think are takedown and submission abilities. Granted, Taisimov does have a lot of submissions himself, but he hasn't had one in a very long time. He hasn't had one since 2013, so he's kind of put that side of his career, I think, on the back burner. And I think that ultimately, actually looking over here, he hasn't had a submission since 2014. So maybe this thing stays standing. It's really hard to say just by looking at the numbers. When we look at pure output, I think that Ferreira is going to be able to point his way to victory here, and he is the ultimately one that we have picked. So we are picking Carlos Diego Ferreira, but this one is tight for me. I'm going to say grain of salt on this one. Going to be a tough one to call, but ultimately we are picking Carlos. In a tight matchup at ladies flyweight, we're going to have Joanne JoJo Calderwood take on Andrea KGB Lee in what should be a very interesting matchup. So these fighters are even in a lot of ways. They both have high output. They both do a little bit of grappling. They do have some takedowns. But I think kind of the edge here is really going to be where JoJo trains out of. She is a tri-star fighter, and I have to give her a big edge there for training with Firas Zahabi versus Andrea Lee, who's training out of the Karate Mafia. Not a gym at the same level as TriStar. Nothing bad about Karate Mafia, but it's not the same level as TriStar. When we look at their records, we know Andrea Lee looks really good right now. She is on a great win streak. And we have JoJo taking a loss to Caitlin Chikagian, but I think that JoJo is going to be able to get back on it here. We saw her great against Ariane Lipski. She looked phenomenal there, and I think she's going to be able to fill the holes in her game and ultimately defeat a fighter like Andrea Lee. I think that her output is good enough. I think that she has worked on her takedown and grappling ability, so I think that if it does go to the ground there, I think she's going to be okay enough to hold off an excellent grapple like Andrea Lee. And let's just keep in mind, too, that Andrea Lee does have a 4-inch reach advantage, but we know JoJo is pretty good at getting inside, and I think she'll be able to do that. I think she'll be able to execute her movement. As long as her gas tank is there, I think she'll be able to pick up a win here, and we know that she's being trained world-class over at TriStar, so that's what's giving me the little bit edge here. It is close. These fighters are, separated by basically a tenth of a point, and I think that really comes down to that gym. So it is even for the most part, but ultimately we are picking Calderwood to pick up a W in Abu Dhabi. Now, I know I just gave the edge to a fighter that trains out of a superior gym, but this will not be the case in this matchup. We have Bilal, remember the name Muhammad, training over for sport, taking on Takashi Sato, who trains at a, not same kind of style gym over in Japan. But I think Sato here, the way he fights and the way he looks is going to outpace Muhammad. So ultimately, with the slight reach advantage for Sato. The way he's getting it done as well, he just looks phenomenal right now. He has back-to-back TKOs in the second round, whereas that Belal has kind of a love affair with decisions. He doesn't really close the door, and I think ultimately fight IQ is going to play a factor here as well. He has a much higher finish rate in Sato. I think that even though Muhammad might be slightly more technical, he doesn't really put it on. He never smells blood. He never really shuts the door. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's 11 decision victories in his career, whereas Sato has an 70% finish rate on all of his fights. He has 10 KOs, 2 submissions over his 17 fights in total, or his 15 wins. And I think that this guy can get it done because of that IQ, because of that killer instinct, and shut down a guy who should, I think under most circumstances, training at Roufusport, usually be projected to win. But ultimately, I think the Japanese fighter here gets it done. We are picking Sato in this matchup. All right, in our next matchup, we're going to have Nordine Talib taking on the king of kung fu, Muslim Salikov. And in this one, I am picking Salikov. Again, not a whole lot of information here. I expect it to be a fight that does stay standing primarily, and Salikov just has some pretty good wins. He has the KO over Melvin Guillard. He has another KO over Ricky Rainey. His only loss here recently in the UFC was against Alex Garcia, and that was via rear naked choke. And without Nordine Talib having any submissions to his record, I don't think he's going to be able to win here. He also has a few losses here. He lost to Sean Strickland via TKO punches. He's lost to guys like Ponzinibbio. I think that ultimately here, the Russian fighter is going to be able to get it done. I think that our king of kung fu picks up a W in Abu Dhabi. And in our final contest, we have Zach Cummins taking on Omari Arkadikamov, the Wolverine, and this one should be a pretty good fight at welterweight. Excuse me, I mean middleweight. My apologies. So in this one, we have the Wolverine fighting out of American Top Team. He's another ATT fighter, and I think ultimately he picks up the W here. I think that he has better output than Cummins. I think he has a little bit better takedown game than Cummins, and I also like that he has a team advantage. So ultimately, I think that the Wolverine picks up a W here in Abu Dhabi. So that brings us to the end of the crunched fights. So I'm going to go through those one more time, and I will tell you which ones are not crunched for debuting fights. So we have Poirier, Barboza, Ramos, Blades, Ferreira, Sato, Salikov, Nurmagomedov, and Calderwood to round things out. I don't think it was in the same order I read them, but I wrote them down in a different order. Then for our debuting fights, we have Ottoman Azatar versus Teimu Pakialan, Liana Jojua versus Sarah Morris, Don Madge versus Faris Ziam, Zubara Takov versus Liron Murphy, and then we have Adam Yandiev taking on Punhale Serrano, I believe. So those 5 fights that I just mentioned, those will be crunched out for the debuting side of things once I get the last piece of information that I'm looking for, and I'll be able to get that information to you guys. It'll probably be on Twitter or Facebook. I don't think I'll do any kind of short podcast to throw it out there. It'll just be some names, but you will get that eventually. I think I'd said during the last show or early in this one, I had to record this podcast, and it's even going to get released early. Usually you'll see this as early as Sunday when I'm recording it. So some of this stuff may be subject to change. We know there's always late minute change outs, and I'll do my best to crunch those, but I may not be able to because I'll be traveling this week, and so that's kind of why it's early altogether, is that I'm just not going to be able to do it on Tuesday like usual. So we just went and did it a little bit early here. But I do have a few questions, so let's get into the mailbag. All right, so Nick has quite a few questions here for us, but nobody else wrote in, so we're going to go through all of them for him. So Nick on Twitter got in touch with me, and you can too, by the way, at MMA Fight Picks 01. So his first question is, what's next for Curtis Blades, assuming he wins? So for Curtis Blades, I'm looking at the UFC rankings right now, or SureDogs rankings, and I'm looking at it, and I think his best fight, assuming he wins, he's ranked 7th at the moment here, according to what I'm looking at. I think it's a Junior Dos Santos or Derek Lewis fight. I think those are the only ones that really make sense, assuming he wins. I don't want to see him fight Overeem. I don't really want to see him fight Volkov. I think that he has to get up there again. I think potentially him and Ngannou maybe needs to happen again if Ngannou is able to capture the title. I think that he was put away a little too early, and I think he's able to claw his way back up the ladder here. I don't know if he can ultimately defeat a guy like Dos Santos or even Derek Lewis. He's not my favorite fighter in the world, to be perfectly honest. I think he just grinds it out a little too much for me. I don't think he uses his hands to their fullest ability like other guys like Dos Santos and I think Derek Lewis do. So ultimately, I think Blaydes has to fight one of those guys, and that's his best move going forward, assuming he picks up the W here. And we have it called to pick up the W, but that's what I think will be best for him if he goes forward. Well, I kind of talked about it earlier. I guess I didn't give a call, and I usually don't give a call about these things, but you had asked, is it more likely that Khabib finishes Dustin or vice versa? And because I have Poirier picked in this one, I'm going to go ahead and say Poirier. I think that he could potentially connect with Khabib with a liver shot. I think it's going to be the kind of thing that does take time to accomplish. I don't think he's going to go out there and just start ripping to the body and try to put it on early. I can see this being a third, fourth, even fifth round outcome. I think this thing's going to be more of a dogfight than anybody ever saw coming. It will be difficult for Poirier to pick up a decision victory in Abu Dhabi. If it's a dominant performance, I think it'll be a little bit easier. But if it is tight, I think them ultimately keeping it with Khabib. But I think Poirier is going to be able to get it done here deep into the fourth or fifth round, and I think he's going to win via TKO. So you had asked, could the fight between Calderwood and Lee be considered a title eliminator? And I think it has the makings of one. We need somebody to fight Shevchenko that is at least in her weight class for now. I think we'll see a clash of inter-weight classes at some point, but right now I think she has to kind of clear out the division. And I think it could be, but honestly, Shevchenko I think is going to mop the floor with either one of them. I don't see Calderwood or Lee giving her a hard time at all. Maybe Shakagian, though, should probably be in that title shot looking at the rankings here. The UFC rankings have her at number 2. She had also beaten Calderwood, so I think she's honestly the next one in line, really. And then Calderwood versus Lee is really just an eliminator to get the top contender after that, especially since Carmouche was defeated by Shevchenko, and she's sitting down third on the list. There's also Jennifer Maia at 4, but she hasn't fought recently to the best of my knowledge. Let's see, what was her last victory here? Oh, yeah, she fought Modafferi here. I don't think Jennifer Maia is going to be fighting for a title anytime soon. So, yeah, this is, I guess, is a top contender eliminator, and potentially who's to go face the meat grinder known as Shevchenko, and I think Shevchenko beats all of them. I think, honestly, Shevchenko versus Nunes 3 is probably the best fight, in my opinion. Or maybe even Zhang coming up to fight Shevchenko, but I think Shevchenko is honestly too big for Zhang. I think she'll dismantle her. But either way, I think Shevchenko holds on to that division, and we get a super fight coming soon. And you got a few more questions here. So, is Edson Barboza overrated? No, I honestly don't think so. He almost has like this striker gatekeeper quality. It seems like guys that you maybe question their striking, they seem to put him against. They gave him, I think it was Kevin Lee, who is a very good grappler, who's also a good striker, but he has a little bit of quit in him, I think, sometimes, and hopefully it's a hobby, can get that out of him. And they gave him Khabib. I think he's just kind of like if you're good at grappling, fight this guy to see if you're also good at striking kind of gatekeeper, which is a weird way to describe a guy. But the UFC really likes him for some reason. He gets top talent all the time, and he doesn't always win. He's got losses to Gaethje. His really only win in the last, 4 outings was against Dan Hooker, and that seemed like kind of a fluke. So I don't know what the deal is. I think he's just the kind of guy that when Dana calls, he goes, hey, we need a phenomenal striker to fight somebody and maybe put on a highlight reel performance. Calls Barboza. He probably just says yes to anything. They're like, hey, would you like to fight a bear? Would you like to fight Superman? He goes, yeah, I'll probably heel kick him. Wheel kick him. He's just that kind of guy. He's there to collect the paycheck and fight and do the best. And I don't think he's overrated. I think he just is always available, and he gets great talent because he has the ability to create highlight reels. I think he's rated appropriately, ultimately. And then finally here, how do you think the winner of the winner of the main event here, so Poirier versus Khabib, fares against Tony? So I think Tony can beat either one of them, to be perfectly honest. I've had Tony picked for a long time. I haven't had it crunched up until recently, but I actually had Khabib winning in the past against Tony. I wonder if that would change. My heart of hearts, though, always believes Tony's scramble game, his elbows from the bottom, would really hurt Khabib and prevent him from really getting top control. And I think Tony just, as the round goes on, I think he would actually put such a pace on Khabib that he would actually have an empty gas tank. Also, another thing, too, in the past, I thought that was maybe Tony's best pathway to victory when Khabib had these really horrific weight cuts. And I'm not saying he had an easy one against Conor either. Supposedly he wasn't doing well after that one, but he still performed well. I think that back when his weight cuts were worse, Tony had that kind of ace in the hole for that 4th and 5th round. I think he would have demolished Khabib in the 4th and 5th round just because how depleted his body would have been from dehydrating himself. Now he's got a nutritionist, seems to be a little bit more, his liver's not shutting down basically, and I think he'll have the ability maybe to hang with Tony a little more, but my heart of hearts still says Tony. I think Tony's the people's champ. Fergie Ferg going to love you a long time. He's going to love 155 pounds, and I think he's going to be the champion no matter what, for what it's worth. Now, I could pick against him, too. I got to go through the stats for whomever he ends up fighting. But I love Tony, and I think he could be and will be the champion of this division as things stand right now. All right, kind of a long podcast here. The longest one I think I've ever come out with, but that happens when you talk about the main event for over 10 minutes, right? All right, so you can get in touch with the Fighting Spirit Podcast just like Nick did here on Twitter. So at MMA Fight Pick 01, follow me there. You can rate the show. You also can comment on my tweets where I ask for questions. That's how Nick wrote into the show. You also get in touch with me at fightingspiritpodcast@gmail.com. That's for the email. I do like emails. Twitter's fine too. Facebook. We also can get in touch with us there. We're also on all your podcast platforms of choice. Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on iTunes. All those fun spots. We also have a Patreon as well. So I've been posting all the betting tips there. I've been posting the spirit and liquor reviews, and I'm waiting to have somebody's credit read on the show. So head on over to there. The link is down in the description below, or the link on your podcast app in the description if you'd like to support the show in any way that makes the most sense for you. All right, so I will talk to you on potentially Saturday night. My trip has me getting in late on Friday, so I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to be able to catch the very, very beginning of this fight. It is taking place at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, so it's a very unusual start time for a pay-per-view. Kind of surprised they actually, broke away from their usual start time model, but they did, and I think it's a good thing. But I should be able to see most of the fights, and we'll be able to get on that retrospective. Also, keep an eye out for those debuting fight picks as well. I'm very confident about all the statistics. Well, for the most part, the top fights. So later on, we get to the less well-known fighters like, the Omari Akhmed versus Zach Cummings fight. The fights like that I mentioned. It's, I think, a little less well-known at this point. Anyways, I'm rambling. This has been a long show. And until I speak with you again, when the Diamond has his 155-pound crown, as I'm calling it, happy fight picking.